daughter of 2 doctors. My mother was a pediatrician and allergist, and there was none of this. My mother was a doctor from the mid-50s until the 80s, and my son was born in 2004. He's 12 years old now, and she had never seen anything like this. I mean, oh, let me take that back. She saw it once. She told me that at Children's Hospital, where she did her residency, and this is like 1952 or 1955, somewhere around that, that they took her to see one child in the hospital in some dark down room somewhere. She says, they said, you'll never see it. This is so rare, you'll never see another child like this, but we want you to see this. So it was a child with autism, and you know, that view. We only knew Rain Man. Like a lot of other parents, I had no idea what autism was, except for what I saw a little bit on TV of the rocking back and forth. And he didn't fit that. He didn't seem like, we couldn't tell for a while if it was autism, because he was always very affectionate. He always wanted to be held and squeezed and hugged. And it was only later, through having OT, that we understood he was a sensory seeker. But that he still had a lot of signs.
My name is Rob Eckstein. This is my wife Nira Eckstein, my son Avi, who shortly after his MMR vaccine was showing autistic type behaviors, and it was autism. It involved high fevers, loss of language, the inability to really emote anything intelligible for up to 4 years. Do you want to continue?
Sure. When he was born, he was very healthy. He was the love of our life. We went through infertility for 6 years, so he was a miracle baby. I have to say now he's a miracle too. We've done a lot to treat him, and he has a lot of language. But I want to go back to the history, because when he was born, when I look back, there were little things that happened along the way, but the crushing time was at 19 months. So I'm not really sure what's connected to what vaccine, but through watching this film and being part of it, I definitely see the connections. He was hyper alert even from birth. He never had that like 12 hours sleeping that normal babies have, but in every other way he was typically developing. He started to then get sensory issues. After every illness, after every vaccine, he had reactions, but we didn't know they were reactions because the doctors just said it's normal. Every time it was 102 fever. There was one time that he turned blue.
Right.
And that was the only time, I don't remember which vaccine, do you?
When did I turn blue?
You turned blue when we brought you home. There was a time you were having a hard time breathing.
Right.
And it got really scary, and also the high-pitched screams. I think when I see the film, there's things that come back to me, those high-pitched screams that went on for 2-3 days at a time. It was horrendous. And all the classic symptoms. He had head banging. He had the drooling. Honestly, a lot of the things I think I block out. It was a very, very dark time in our lives. That he went from that loving, I have pictures and video, a little bit of video, from 6 months to 13 months that were just amazing. Just all that beautiful growth that you see, the smiles, love of books, love of toys. Everybody would hold him in our synagogue. It was passed around the baby. He was happy. And then all of a sudden it was gone. And it wasn't an overnight gone. I mean, he still at the beginning was speaking, but he started losing things, and the things that I remember the most were that when he stopped looking at us.
At some point, he seemed to forget who we were. He would look at us and look through us. He also altered the way he played with his toys. He would just stack them up. No matter what the toy was, he would stack them up and knock them down, and stack them up and knock them down.
And throw them all over the room.
He would start to perseverate on things like the light switch and the ceiling fans, you know, and the switch on and off hundreds of times.
And the fan spinning and looking at the spinning and the spinning and the spinning.
Right.
Do you remember any of that?
Yeah, on Yarmouth Road, actually.
What do you remember? Right, at our friend's house, you were probably around 3 or 4. What do you remember?
Turning the fan on and off.
Right, and remember Evan told you to stop doing that.
It was Sabbath, it was Shabbos,
Right,
and we're not allowed
right,
to do switches.
Right, but we couldn't stop him.
We couldn't stop
Why
him.
did you like turning the fan off and on?
So I MRI to see what happened.
Just to see what would happen. Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, so
Right.
the fan, and his body, he would be spinning in circles.
Oh, he'd spin along with the fan. That's the other thing. That's right.
When he was 19 months, and again, when I'm looking through the papers, I'm not really sure. We say MMR. MMR, he had it 15 months because we didn't have insurance at 12 months, so it was a little bit delayed. And at 18 months, he had the 4th DTaP and whatever goes with that. I don't know if it was varicella, pneumovax. But that's when it all went downhill. And within 2 months, he was gone. I mean, like my husband said, he was looking through us. He was headbanging. He stopped eating. It just was a cascade that was disastrous. And then we had a friend who told us about early intervention. So when he was 23 months, we started early intervention. And that was really good, but I didn't know what to expect. And then we went for another vaccine at 2. And I always remember this because it was the only birthday party we ever planned really for him. That we had invited friends. We were going to have a puppet show. And instead, he had 105 fever the night before his party, and we went to the hospital. That was the end of the
What was the
birthday
night
party.
before?
And that fever was a key. That was a key time because after that fever, he became
Worse.
like a rag doll. They had to put him in cold water to get the fever down. And
But
he
they just said it's normal, and of course they just gave him more Tylenol.
Oh, they
and
said they
he
see it all the time, right? Yeah. So he just became like a puppet, like a rag doll. He just lost. That's what they kept telling him, low body tone. That's when we started to hear low body tone, like he had no bones. It was just all skin, and it was really bad. It was really bad. Screaming and diarrhea.
Oh my gosh.
Diarrhea like you wouldn't believe.
He definitely was a leaky gut kid.
Yeah.
And from a year and a half to 3.5, it was nonstop. And I would go to the doctor, and they would say toddler's diarrhea, and don't give him juice, and I had stopped all those, and I feel bad because I would get mad at him because he had it running down his leg, and why didn't you let us know? And
How did it run down my leg?
it was like water, and it just kept going.
It's
and
called
you
gravity.
couldn't catch it in time.
No, it went. I thought it goes through my down here.
Yeah, but you had so much, it was explosive. It's only later with the internet, with seeing parents would take pictures and send pictures to the doctor, but we didn't have smartphones then. It's only 8 years ago, but very few people had smartphones back then. But I realized at the time, and the turning point for us, even though we had some early intervention that was helping, was that when he was 3 years and 3 months old, I was at a friend's house before at Toverworth Amherst, and I was telling the story of how my son was, and that this is a friend of mine. She didn't know.
Excuse me, can I say one last thing?
Go.
I lived in Wynwood, right? When they were fixing up my house, I moved about Kenwood, then I moved back to Wynwood.
So I'm going to come back to that. So just before that, when you were 2.5, we went there, and 3.5. It's 6 months before that. So the woman who was doing makeup, who was for pictures, she said to me, I have a son with autism also. And I said, yeah. And she said, and he's getting better. And I go, well, what are you doing? We do early intervention. And she said, we do biomed treatment. And I said, what's that? And now I help parents with that. And she told me about a doctor in New Jersey, Dr. Newbrander. And she told me about, it was called the DAN movement then, Defeat Autism Now, and now that's turned into MAPS, doctors, MAP meds. And we then made an appointment. It was very expensive. I think it was like $500 for the first appointment, plus all the labs. Insurance doesn't cover. Thank God my mother helped me. But that was the turning point.
Right.
That we then changed his diet. We just went right to it. We took out gluten and dairy, and it was an unbelievable. It wasn't the only thing to do. So I just want to caution parents that, listen, that it's not enough to say you take a gluten casing-free diet. That was the beginning.
He began to recover. All of a sudden, he started speaking again. He started speaking sentences, like words that were stored up in his memory bank that he couldn't emote or get out, were getting out. And he was speaking, and he was making sense.
I mean, it was 2 and 3 words. It wasn't full sentences.
Right.
I remember like taking a walk with him down the block, and he started to point. He was almost 4 years old at this point, and pointing, sky, bird, light, the street lamp, and it, like my husband said, it was like it was in there, but it couldn't come out. And that was the point that I know that these children have so much inside, and we need to recover them. And I just have been a very determined mom.
Well, you guys have done a great job. You're doing really well.
What do you think?
Yes.
How's your school?
Good.
You like your
It's
school?
awesome.
Tell about your school.
It's the Quaker School at Horsham.
And you just switched to a new school.
I switched to a new school,
And you enjoy the school.
and I enjoyed it.
Good. I'm glad you're happy. That's the main thing. And you're feeling better.
Yeah.
And you signed the bus already, haven't you?
Yeah.
That even though he's getting a lot better from a lot of the treatments we've done, both biomed and homeopathy, that there's an autoimmune component that I'm fighting. It's not just recovery. For some people, it's managed recovery, that giving the supplements, giving them things, but something else happened. He was doing so much better in public school, and then everything fell apart in 3rd grade. And he had strep twice, like normal, and then all of a sudden his behaviors, everything that we had been improving, fell apart. And he got violent, and he did crazy things. Can I tell, like what?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell, or you want me to tell?
Yeah.
He stripped his clothes. He jumped off filing cabinets. They thought, I don't want to say all the kinds of words we would say medically or psychologically about it, but it was very, very scary. We had a very hard time keeping him in school, and I was lucky that having gone to talk at conferences that I had heard of something called PANDAS, Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorder,
encephalitis.
associated with streptococcus, and the technical name is autoimmune encephalitis.
Yeah.
And now actually seeing vaxxed a few times, I'm like really focusing more that it's encephalitis and it's autoimmune and it's not gone. I mean, and he actually just had a flare last week, and we went.
And I'll know when a flare's coming on because I give Avi a bathe him. If I touch the top of his head, he'll say it hurts. If I just touch it, no pressure at all. And sometimes Avi will say to me, "My head feels hot." Point to his forehead, and you point to his forehead's completely cool, completely fine, which tells me that inside the brain is on fire,
Right.
and you know that this is going to happen. You know what's coming, and unfortunately, this is what we're going through now. Much more so than the autism itself.
And what's even scarier is that our medical establishment, they don't get it, and that scares me more than anything. That only the private autism specialists are doing something about it, or homeopaths or chiropractors, and that if you go to emergency, and we did, they're glazed over. They
They don't know what we're talking.
They don't know. And I even asked in emergency, I said, is there Bryn Mawr Hospital, one of the best hospitals in Philadelphia region, do you have any specialist in this hospital that knows about autoimmune encephalitis? And they said no. And all they would do is give us psychiatric drugs for him, and I said no.